small action can have impact in communities, you know, like giving attention, sharing, being thankful. This idea of that Christy said, like gratitude as an attitude. No, I really, really appreciate what you are giving us today. These tools from classrooms that can be implemented in our daily life, you know, that we also can use these tools to the civil society initiatives. As I told you, I participate in the Jai Jagat movement. Jai Jagat, as you saw in the video, has 4 pillars. One is end poverty. The second one is action against climate change. The third one is eradication of discrimination. And the last one is regarding to promote peace and non-violence. So, and for me, it's really connected what I do in my daily life and what I do and we do from Fundación Comparlante in our work in the field. No? One of the things that I really enjoy and learn from Jai Jagat is this idea of think globally but act locally, you know? So these activities that Monica, Srishti, and Simone share with us today can be an inspiration for our daily work, no? For the work that we do as an activist or as a social worker or as a professional or a business person, you know? In different aspects of our life, we can introduce this Haimsa concept. So I want to share with you today one of the projects of Fundación Comparlante, which is, can you share, Jemejay, the other image first? The one which is in English? Yeah, thank you. Well, we use art as a tool to create awareness, as I already told you. So this is a literary contest for kids, which is called My Word, My Way. What we give kids from 6 to 13 years old are these characters, which are kids with different kind of disabilities. A blind boy, a girl which is a wheelchair user, a girl with Down syndrome, and a deaf boy. And we invite young writers to write a story using one of these characters. And why are we doing this? Because we understand the power of art. We think that this is a powerful tool to sensitize the community about the capabilities of people with disabilities. As I say, I really I saw the impact of this project. This was the first edition in 2017. Children for 5 different countries participate, writing the short stories, and the work that we did with the communities, with the families, and with the school was really, really impactful. We use this to break down stereotypes, negative stereotypes. What I feel is the slow piece is about that, no? It's give us tools to understand, but also to have a positive and a proactive attitude toward these marginalized groups of the society. So now, can you share the second image, please? Now, Jemejay. Thank you. Now, on March, we launched the second edition of this contest for kids with different characters. Now we have autism, we have cerebral paralysis. We want to show diversity as a value. We want to talk about disabilities among kids to promote, to break down, to remove barriers, as Simone said, and also to promote solidarity, love, care, and respect to each other. So this is one of the campaigns that we are doing today at Fundación Comparlante, and I really want to share with you this because I believe that this can be an impactful one, and I would love to share more about this with you. If you need more information, you can visit our website or social media as Comparlante. Thank you for this space. Thank you, Riva.
Sorry, my screen went blank for a second there. I've just come back to you. Thank you so much, Lorena. We have a couple of questions that have come in. Let me give them both to you. And I think maybe all four of you may want to address them in some kind of way. The first question was really about obstacles. And I know each of the three of you, Christy, Simone, and Monica, have talked a little bit about obstacles, but the question is more about how specifically did you address those obstacles? So think about that when I'm going to give you both of the questions at the same time, so you can try and bring your answers together a little bit. So how specifically did you address the obstacles that you faced? And then the second question is about how the work is received. So do you have resistance or acceptance from the families in the school? And in particular, what's the kind of response from families who may have come from situations of violence? So if you want to think about those two questions just for a second, and then I will start. Do I get to pick who I start with? Or does somebody want to start? No, okay. Well, why don't we start with Monica then?
Okay, so I will speak to obstacles. So for me, my first obstacle was overcoming, or the first barrier was overcoming the barrier that I created myself, which was the obstacle of time. So in Canada, we have a very specific curriculum that we must follow. It's set out by the government, and it's pretty close to impossible to cover everything in detail. So for me, I had to let go of covering everything in there in detail and focusing what's important for children. So I would say my first barrier was the prescribed curriculum. And secondly, I think of equal importance to mention was I always know that I have to get buy-in from my administrator. So I work in a school where the principal is changing every 3 years because we get new principals, they come and get a little training, and then they move off to bigger schools. So for me, I have to think each time we get a new administrator, I have to think about how I'm going to get that administrator to support what I'm doing. So sometimes, well, usually it comes first by linking it to the curriculum, because there's always ways to link it in, and then trying to convince them how it's good for students. So I would say those were my two greatest barriers when incorporating peaceful practices and sort of a peaceful underlying curriculum into my classroom.
Thank you so much, Monica. Christy, do you want to go next?
Sure. Some of the earlier barriers, I guess, and not earlier, maybe even continual, given the clientele that I work with, sometimes my students can be violent because they have varying things going on in their lives, and they can be quite violent, throwing things or hurting others or hurting themselves. in different situations. And so looking at ways that when they come to school that they can interact positively, figuring out ways of how you diffuse situations with students, and then really looking at breaking down and supporting students so that those interactions are learning opportunities. So if a student, has a rage and throws things around, how do they get back into the classroom? How do you work with them to ensure that they still feel a part of the community after they've calmed down? How do you make sure that they have a part in that reconciliation process inside that classroom, and that they can build and learn skills to mitigate some of that happening in the future? So that was definitely alongside this work and with this work. So what are steps of adding in professionals into those paraprofessionals? So working with families who are at or below poverty, and getting people access to community members that can help support them for food and counseling, and all of those are also part of this process, and working with that as a team. Like I've said before, I've had admin support and not admin support, but really it's about forming those connections with those families as best you can. And then as with the buy-in piece, right, as you work through kids and they start to see that their own children have more coping strategies and they're more involved and they feel like they become more of a community, you start to see massive behavior changes in some of the typically quite violent kids, or kids that are excluded, or kids that feel on the margins or are on the margins, that they become part of our community and they have a place and a contribution and an acceptance, and a shared experience. And that's one of the reasons I started with food, was that shared experience piece, was that everyone could experience it, even with a feeding tube. You can experience a meal together, and then you can start talking about, in a calm, peaceful, high needs met area, some of the bigger ideas and how that affects them. So how does your access to food, how is land rights involved, how is housing involved, how you get your food? So just ways to connect your curriculum, still meet all of those curriculum outcomes, but in a way that builds that community and that relationships with each other.
Simone, I wonder if you could address the piece about the resistance or acceptance from the families. And before you start, I want to just give you your next 3 questions so you can start to think about them. One is about the relationship between slow peace and conflict resolution, and how can slow peace be used in conflict resolution. And the second is about any changes you've had to your practice during the pandemic. And the third one, very specifically for you, Christy, is about the evaluation piece. You talked about slow peace and evaluation, and we have a question from one of our participants wondering a little bit more about that. So let me leave you with those. Let me go back to Simone and ask if she would address the question about resistance or acceptance from families.
Okay. First wanted to tie in with Monica and state that obstacles of time and administration is a big part of it. So definitely in the school that I teach, and there are some pretty big cultural differences, many new immigrants, and Canada it's got winter for a long time. So one of the barriers for sure is helping parents understand that it is okay, if you're dressed appropriately, to spend time outside experiencing nature, to help them understand that having live animals in the classroom and lots of natural materials
although it may not look like the kind of schooling that they experience, there is still lots of learning going on. So there's helping them understand that their educational expectations for their child, the idea of meeting curriculum, is still happening when we are outside, when we have nature in the classroom. But always, it's that school culture, and your administration sets the school culture. So that can be a huge barrier, or it can be a huge support. So part of what I need to do is educate not only administration, but staff. So volunteering to sit on the character education committee for the school, that helps to bring staff in and understand where I'm coming from, inviting parents into the classroom, having them go out with us and experience the real world. So there's a lot of fear and mistrust about engaging with nature in this new setting of Canada, where it's very cold and, you know, there might be dangers out there. So just kind of teaching the parents alongside the students. So those kinds of steps, I guess, is how I can work to remove those barriers. And I can say, kind of addressing how the work is received. Once I share that education piece with both staff and parents, they are interested in supporting what we do. And Reva, you know that, and Jill too, that we had a Jajagat march through the school, and we had all the classrooms create signs, and we marched to the song, and we went to the gym, and if you present it in a positive way that these students can make a change, we are all powerful in our ability to make changes within our community. I mean, that was amazing. So removing barriers takes educating and modeling to demonstrate what you can do. I hope that answers it.
Thanks so much, Simone. Before we continue, just some people are having trouble hearing us a little bit. So if everybody could just make an effort to speak a little more loudly, use those teacher voices, folks. Okay, so we have a special request that Christy maybe would go first to talk about the evaluation piece. And then after, we'll come back to Monica and Simone. Maybe Monica, if you can think about the conflict piece, and Simone, if you want to think about the changes during the pandemic. Okay.
Okay, so when I was looking at the concept of ahimsa in my assessment practices, I started to look at what was my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal in teaching students, any students, is that you find out the amount of learning that they've learned, so that it can dictate where you need to fill in spaces, or where they need to go next. Doesn't matter if they have learning disabilities or not. Really, that's your ultimate goal to me with assessment. And yes, sometimes you are restricted with mandated government assessment pieces, but there are ways to support students. And it can look like simply having a reader and a scribe for assessment pieces. It can look like making sure that those kids have had food before they have their assessment. Have you had a snack? Have you had breakfast? It can look like breaking up the questions into different font sizes, or on pages, or things in between. It can look like having them write on their bellies on the carpet, or it can look like them coming up with an alternative form that it doesn't have to be pencil and paper. Can it be a performance piece? Can it be a dance? Can you show me your learning in a way that proves that you have learned what you needed to do for any curriculum piece? and really looking at that student and seeing their strengths and seeing where you can support them in all the subject areas is one way that also builds community, because you can show the students you see them, you've got a plan, and then also just to remind them that the assessment pieces are for the teacher, and they really should be. They should be for the teacher as a signpost, as a way to plan for their needs and to plan for where they are going in their learning. So that's where I see when I look at ahimsa and you start to think about doing no harm, what it looks like when you start to break down everyday activities in your classrooms. So yeah, I hope that answers it.
I think it does, but if the questioner doesn't, we'll get another question back. Before I turn it to Monica, I want to actually start by giving you a little story about an experience I had in one of Monica's classrooms about 4 years ago when she and I were doing some work together. I had been there for the better part of the day. The students went out for recess, and when they came back, about 3 or 4 students came in first, and I was there. Monica was not in the classroom at the time. As they were coming in, one of the little boys said that another little boy had hurt him during recess. Didn't say it to me, didn't say it to anybody in particular, just said it out loud. A little girl who was in the room looked at the second little boy and said, "Did you do that?" And the second little boy sort of looked down at his feet and he said, "Yeah, I did." And then he went over to the first little boy, put his arm around him and said, "I'm so sorry, I wasn't thinking." And that was it. That was the end of it. I was waiting. These were 8-year-olds. I was waiting for one of them to bring it up when Monica came into the classroom, because that had been my experience in other classrooms, but that didn't happen. And so that's why I want to give Monica this question about conflict and dealing with conflict, because I think that little incident speaks to what she does in her classrooms, and maybe she can talk a little bit about how her students would have gotten to that point.
Hello again. So when it comes to conflict resolution, I think that I always start by asking students what they did. I try not to start with who started it, because we all know it's the other person, right? Children always do that. So I always start with, what did you do? Or what do you think that you did that hurt this other person's feelings? So it takes practice, because at first everybody, children, of course, they just want to tattle on how they were wronged. So I always start by having students think about what they did. And even if they were like the victim at first, so if somebody hit them, so what did they do? What did you do after you were hit to make it worse or make it better? Anyway, so I always try to start there. And I try to have students, and it takes time, over time, become accountable for their actions. And always, at the end of these things, I always want everybody to leave feeling good about themselves. So it's, I joke, I might make a little joke, I might make some high five, but always, at the very least, I say they can't leave until they look each other in the eye and smile. So if it's a fake smile, I'll call it a fake smile. And so by the end, I hope to achieve kids giggling or, truly being at ease with each other. And sometimes another tactic I might use is, if we exit the classroom to talk in the hall, I'll say to student A, "What do you think student B is going to say to me about what you did?" So that forces them to think about other, right? Anyway, so those are just some things that I do. I always take the time to stop and resolve conflict. I try hard never to ignore it. I think it's huge, and I think it's a life skill that we all need.
Thanks, Monica. I think the other thing that I would probably add, having spent quite a bit of time in your classroom, is that idea that you instill in your students about noticing and taking responsibility is also a very important part of this. They have to notice when something is going wrong, and then they have to take responsibility for making it better. And so even the students who aren't necessarily directly involved in the conflict have a responsibility. And I always find that to be a really important part of what you're doing. So I'm going to go to Simone now and just ask her if she would speak a little bit about how your practice of slow peace has changed during the pandemic.
Well, certainly more challenging, but still a big part is trying to connect my students with nature, even though some of them initially weren't even allowed to leave the house. So one of the things that I did, I'm holding up some garden seeds here. So I modeled on video planting seeds and encouraged the students to do some planting of seeds as well, to record what they, the growth of the seeds, those kinds of things. But what's interesting is when we've had our Google meetings, one of the things some of the students are so excited about are the plants and things that they are growing at their home. I've had a number of tours with them with their laptop running around outside on their front step or holding up their parents' phone, showing me all the flowers and things that are now growing in their yards. So I have one little guy every week. He has to take me into the backyard and show me how much things are growing. And we also take a little bit of time, generally at the end of our Google Meet, and we talk about, the students bring it up about the coronavirus and what that kind of means and how they're feeling about that, and lots of questions about what's going to happen in the fall. And I have to say, I'm not sure, but I miss all of you and I hope that we're together. So just being available and showing them that they can take this time to still interact with the natural world. We had invited our students to create their own bird's nests. So they were outside collecting sticks and mud and things like that, making these bird nests and then taking pictures and sending them in. Presently, we generally go and visit the senior complex across from the school and we hand out cards. So we've asked our students to either write a letter online and we'll print it off, or create a card and drop it in a bin at school. And myself and my other grade 1 teacher are going to deliver them to the seniors so that they know that we still care about them and that we are still connected. So those are some ways that I'm continuing with this piecework online.
Thank you so much, Simone. We have a question specifically for Lorena. The question is, could you speak a little bit about how you might use slow peace and these ideas in working with adults in the community rather than focusing on children? So how might these ideas help you in the work that you do in your activism and your advocacy with adults?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I was thinking about the obstacles, no? And how to overcome obstacles. And one of the obstacles that we face usually while working with people with disabilities is that people do not understand, for example, that accessibility is needed for someone, but it's useful for everyone. So sometimes it's really hard to make them understand and to finally effective have a positive attitude towards disability, because most of the people doesn't know that only the 6% of the people born with a disability. Most of the person with disability acquired them after a disease or an accident. And actually, we will all be disabled, because while you get older, you listen less, you walk slow, you can see less. So it's not only accessibility needed for those who, I don't know, has a children with Down syndrome, or a brother with a wheelchair user, we should think about accessibility useful for all of us, and try to be like more open regarding to disability. What I feel is like most of the people are scared about disability, but disability should be something natural in our life, no? So that is one of the obstacles that we face while trying to talk or to carry out programs regarding to disabilities, because it's quite hard to make people understand that this is part of our community, So there's something which is called cycle of invisibility regarding to person with disabilities. Think about a wheelchair user. I really feel that this coronavirus time push us to an exercise of empathy, because now we are feeling what people with disabilities face every day of their lives. No, a wheelchair user cannot go out of their house because the environment are not accessible. And I'm not meaning just ramps. Think about the sidewalks, people from India. Think about the sidewalks in India. It's impossible for a wheelchair user to go around in an autonomous way. Think about public buildings full of stairs. It's impossible to get in. And what about if a person with disability can get into a building? It is possible to stay there. How many buildings, public buildings, have adapted toilets, accessible restrooms? Not much. So that's why most of persons with disabilities, wheelchair users, stay at home. What about educational system? Are all the teachers ready? Are the curriculums adapted to the needs of children with disabilities? In Latin America, only the 20% of the kids with disabilities attend school. The 20% is a terrible number, no? So there's a lot to do, to create more accessible environments, to make it visible, because that's the problem of the invisibility. Because they stay at home, we don't see them, and it's look like they are not part of our community. So it doesn't represent a social problem, and it is never on the government agenda. So nothing is done for person with disability. So we need to work on slow pace to teach the society to start using this ahimsa concept to get more visibility to this sector of the society which is marginalized and became invisible for most of us.
Thank you for that, Lorena. Do you have any specific ideas when you say you want to use some of these, you want to use ahimsa, or you want to use slow peace to get people to think about and address this issue of invisibility? If tomorrow you could snap your fingers and make it happen, what would that look like?
Well, actually, we do have some strategies. The first one is different awareness campaigns where we put people in the shoes of those who suffer barriers every day. The first one is an art exhibition. It's called Accessible Art, and we exhibit it on Congress. In the first one was last year in the National Assembly of Ecuador. So the main idea is to put the decision makers in the shoes of the people with disabilities, to make them feel what people with disability feels every day, no? So we feel that this is a way to create empathy. I don't know if you can create empathy, but to mobilize, to, and yeah, to make it visible. I feel that is one example of a specific action that we are doing now to make other people, powerful people, those who has the power to design laws, to rule the country. So yeah, I feel that this is one example where we are specifically addressing this topic.
Thank you. We're coming up to the end of our time, and so I thought that as we finish, before we finish, and we'll turn it back over to Janmajay in a second, but I would give each of you a chance to say one last thing. What's that final pearl of wisdom you want to offer to our group? Simone, I see you're unmuted, so you go first.
I am unmuted. I guess I'm first. I guess the one thing that I would like everyone to understand is the idea of interconnectedness. And it's certainly an indigenous belief. When you think about ahimsa, it also speaks to the idea of being interconnected. And I think the natural world, because it is everywhere, it looks different in different contexts, in different countries. But if we slow down and spend some time connecting with the natural world, then it develops a sense of peace, caring, mutual respect that can transfer towards people and living together peacefully.
Wonderful. Thanks, Simone. Christy, I'll go to you next.
I think one of the things that I think about the most is that you are going to come across conflicts in my classroom, and sometimes I actually create opportunities for kids to have conflict and actually use those moments for them to learn the social skills and language to work through it. So playing board games with kids is sort of a way that you can put them in an opportunity with a teacher and a few other students, maybe that they've had conflict with, to play against each other or to play with each other, and to teach conflict management skills within context with kids. And so that they have the language when they can take it away from the board game and out onto the playground. They have the language that they can then start to unpack and talk to each other and diffuse their own situations in ways. So putting, I would say maybe don't be afraid of conflict, and really try to view any barriers that come up as learning opportunities to get to know each other better, but also as opportunities to share and teach those social skills in the greater sense. And so I think that's one thing that I would leave you with.
Thank you, Christy. Monica.
Okay, so for wrap up here, I think something that's always guided me and continues to guide me is that since starting all this peace work is I really, everywhere I go, everything I do, I'm always noticing the marginalized. So in all areas of my life, so the homeless person, just, if I'm at a party and I notice somebody not part of the group, yeah, that's where I go, that's where I migrate. So, and in my classroom, I really sort of take under my wing the marginalized students, the students who maybe are ostracized by their peers. And I start by try to make them feel good about themselves. And then I work on having others include them in their activities. So that also extends to the marginalized families, because quite often the families that have violence at home, poverty, quite often those families and parents, they're not comfortable in schools. They don't see it as a priority because they're not getting some of their their basic needs met. So I really try to connect with those families and make them feel part of their child's education or part of my work with them, because I know that if I don't have those families on board, those children will not reach their potential. So two things, my students, they must like me. I have to jump through any hoops I can to make sure that I connect with them. We develop relationship so that they know that they are cared about, that they need to feel liked by me. And then their parents have to, in my opinion, feel the same way. So for me, it's connecting with the marginalized in every area.
Thank you so much, Monica. And Lorena.
Okay, just a short line. I believe that the peaceful world is possible, but to achieve it, it needs the commitment of all. It needs solidarity. So you all are an amazing example of commitment. And yeah, thank you very much for this inspiration.
Thank you, Lorena. I want to thank the Jai Jagat team. I want to remind everybody who's with us that the next session will be on Wednesday at this same time. We have several more really fantastic sessions and then ending on July 4th with a day-long conference. So I do hope that many of you will join us throughout. I want to thank you for being here today and for your amazing questions. And with that, I will turn it back to the team and whoever is taking it over at this point. I'm not sure, but thank you again to Ria, Gary, Janmajay, and Jill and Rajaji. So all the best and Jai Jagat.
Thank you. We'll just wrap this up with a song that was played at the Global Youth Assembly in 2011 at the John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights. It's a song called Ignite Change Now, and I think it should conclude this session with the energy that we'd like to leave you all with. Thank you.
Stand up, you'll see some way, somehow we will ignite change now. Take a look at things usually around us, the mood it brings, the beauty that surrounds us. Our duty, it seems, is all gonna amount up. The movement is seen right now, so mount up. Fight today and it might stay in sight's range. One night a day and the light will ignite things. Be strong, move on, and it might change. Through song we can spark and ignite change.
Some people want time, but they don't know what to do with it. Some people die trying just to get a little bit. Pump up your prime, your potential's not a crime. It is an element of who you are, so to yourself be kind. Turn your words into action. Let your knowledge gain traction. Sitting on your back, you never gain satisfaction. Be a part of something bigger, still it's a fraction.
Hands up with me and say this loud. We will ignite change now. Stand up, you'll see some way, somehow. We will ignite change now. Citizens of Earth, we're all equal and we're innocent at our birth. From every continent, loud. We will ignite change now. Stand up, you'll see some way, somehow. We will ignite change now.
You were born to transform, grown to conform. So debone your skeletons, develop your soul. Cause the world's not a stage, it's a page. You can draw, you can write, gripe, and you can rip it away. Your only fate is to make mistakes. It's never too late to erase your ways. A fresh slate for a fresh face. Feel the ink flow from your hands to your brain to your legs and take shape in the streetscape.
Feel it in my heart, it's time to start. Hold it, I can't control it, it is flowing off the charts. Creative energy flowing through our veins. Can't stop, won't stop, youth have taken in the reins. Get on the good foot, it's just begun. It's the creative cipher, all love under the sun. Express your range, use your talents now, just be the change.
I will be the change I wanna see. Nothing, no one is stopping me. Sisters, bros, stand up, unite. Be the spark, set it alight. All together, I know we can do anything. It starts with me and you. It's our chance, we're the generation igniting change in every nation. Stand up, you'll see. Somewhere, somehow, we will achieve. Ignite change now. Stand up, you'll see. Some way, somehow, we will achieve. Levez-vous, verrez. Santé, manière, que son musique parviendront. Il faut changer maintenant. Levez-vous, verrez. Santé, manière, en quelque sorte.
Stand up, you'll see some way, somehow. We will ignite change now.
Thank you. That's it from my end.
So at the end of every session, what we do is that we say together, Jai Jagat.
Jai Jagat.
Jai Jagat.
Jai Jagat.
Want to just come in and thank all of you for such an incredible session. My goodness, you had many people contacting us and want to know more. So let's keep going, guys. This is terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you, Reva.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Simone, Monica, and Lorena, and our tech team. Jai
Yes,
Jagat.
thank you.
Jai Jagat, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And there is, the website is in the chat, so please do visit our website and you will find more information. And you can also contact us through that. So thank you so very much for being here. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Okay. All right, gang, we're good.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thank you all.
so
You
much.
were amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a
Okay.
good day.
You too. Bye-bye.